Hello and welcome back to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build and explain, upgrade and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start a new adventure with me. We have an engine overview today with a brand name that maybe a lot of North American hobbyists are not aware of, and if they are more than likely not aware of this particular version. This is an STS. This is a Taiwan brand engine manufacturer that started out in 1977. This is the Yen Bong Hardware Company. This is the 853 .12 team version Nitro race engine, 2.1 cc. Take it out of the box here, take a little look. This comes with two Venturis, a 5.4 to make it roar legal, and then also a big 6mm Venturi. We'll take this out of the bag and we'll do our standard overview. We're going to do some teardown. We're going to take a look at all the components, and we're going to discuss why brand new engines out of the box need to be torn down and inspected. And this particular engine is the exact reason why. The condition that certain things were in and there were certain components that were missing is the exact reason why every single brand new engine needs to be torn down, whether it's a ready to run or a race version engine. So let's get it apart and tear into it. All my refreshed engines and brand new engines get torn down, inspected, re-lubed, sealed into a bag. Always put a desiccant bag in their brand new one every time if I can. That way when you get back to them, they're all ready to go, all fresh. You don't have to worry about it. Make a note, put it inside the bag or with the box that the engine has been refreshed or rebuilt or brand new, inspected and lubed and cleaned and ready for installation and break-in as needed. This is a pretty interesting engine, and it depends on how you look at it, but it's pretty beautiful as well. There's a number of unique styling of the engine, as well as some components and styling that kind of mimic some other manufacturers. This is a 2.1 cc engine. We've got an SG shaft here. Front and rear bearing are chrome steel. Uses our standard small block rear exhaust. This is a turbo head, a very lightweight billet machined head, gray anodizing, very low profile, lightweight. Head is undercut, we'll take a look at that. Tons and tons of heat sink ribs all over the block. We'll take off the carb here. We'll have a little discussion about the carb, take a look at it, maybe compare it to something, and we'll continue with the overview. Right out of the bat, one of the first things that are relatively unique is the pinch bolt. The pinch bolt itself is solid brass, which is not very common, especially today, and it uses a lock washing nut here. The other non-common thing is that a traditional 12 uses a 6mm. This uses a 5.5. If you're not aware, a lot of your standard wheel nut wrenches from HPI and others, they use a 5.5mm nut on one side of it, and that works perfect for this particular job. Tool doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to work. So let's get this carb out of there. And take a look. So some of you that have been in the industry or in the hobby for many years, this particular carb might look interestingly similar to another carb. Do you know what that is? Put a comment down below if there's something that pops in your mind that this carb looks like. We'll tell you here in just a moment. But this carb is a 3-needle carb. We have our high speed here, all brass construction for the inlet nipple and housing. Low speed here, a full brass ball stud, and a third mid-speed needle for the mixing cone here on this other side. Kind of shiny, semi-unique STS badge here on the front. This might look composite, but it is not. We have an all-metal core, and this is all one piece. This is all one piece metal, it's all black. So it does look like it's composite, but it's not. Our idle adjustment screw is right here. It comes with 2 different venturis right now. This is a 5.4 Rohr Legal millimeter venturi. It has a 6 millimeter in there as well. Nice big opening in the bottom of the carb. 8.7, almost a 9 millimeter opening on the base or the neck of the carb going inside of the engine. There's not going to be any restriction there. STS was a manufacturer that was going in all the right directions, even though it's a lot older than some other companies. It was first established in 1977, and then around 1986 is when CNC was being introduced, and they were able to make components that much better. This particular engine was released pretty recently in 2015. So in effect, this is still a very current kind of technology engine, even though it's about 9 or 10 years old now. So looking at the carb, what do you think that this is really similar to? How about the HPI 12R XS carb? Take a look. Many features are very much the same. Some are similar, some are unique. Now we'll go in depth with this carb at a later time when we actually have an overview of the 12R XS. But it has a similar looking badge, but this is a metal core carb and it's composite surround. But this is pretty similar. One of the unique features about this, with being this is a metal body, that idle screw is a little bit longer and the middle feature is a little bit longer. This cap for the mixing cone and the 3rd speed needle is cut out here, which is a little bit different. The composite one for the 12R XS does not utilize removable venturis. And something to note that makes this a little bit better than the 12R XS carb. One, the opening, and this has a long needle spray bar. A lot of the long needle spray bars are normally in the big block 21 and 28 style slide car versions. It's got a long spray bar inside compared to a short style spray bar that, for example, you'll find in that all billet C12 Novarossi carb. So we talked a little bit, and we're going to continue to talk about some of the things that were wrong or missing. One thing that was missing is the O-ring that sits at the base of this carb. Remember, this is a brand new engine and it had some issues, but now it's all ready to go. So with some experience and with some spare parts, I was actually able to get a brand new O-ring for that 12R XS, and now we have it on that base of the carb. Then the carb has been completely gone through. Everything's been moly coated, and this boot here, the slide boot, is another thing that even though it was brand new, it was bad. It was cracked in a number of different areas, but we were able to replace the boot, and now that's set to go. Set that carb to the side. Let's take a little look at the block again without the carb. We're going to go in through this back plate. We're going to take a look at the internals, take off the head, take everything apart, talk about it a bit, review some of the components and some of the history about the company and the engine, and keep on going. So these use an M2.5 bolt on the back plate. Let's give these bolts just a little measure. M2.5 by 6 millimeter long, so a pretty standard back plate bolt size. This is a semi-interference engine. Notice that cutout there on the back plate, which denotes up, and that gives clearance to the piston skirt. Polished outside, butyl O-ring there on the inside. A nice looking back plate, relatively simple, and it's nice to have that interference cutout. Let's take a look on the inside here. You're going to see why this is a pretty special engine and why STS was all going on the right path, and then everything fell apart for the company. Let's pop off that head. This is a 4-bolt head. Pop these bolts out. Why don't we give them a little measure for folks that are always curious about that. This is an M3. It's an M3 by 14 millimeter bolt. So pretty standard head bolt. This is a very, very lightweight cut out CNC machined head. It's a relatively low profile. Now this is the 853 engine and it was released in 2015. There was only one other engine that was released before the manufacturer went away, and almost kind of mysteriously. And that's the 833. It's a very similar engine to this 12 size race engine, but the head was a little bit taller. People that wanted a little bit more cooling, they were willing to sacrifice with a little bit of added weight. But if you wanted the low profile head and super lightweight, you can use this 853 head on here. Let's go ahead and weigh the head. So we're looking at in grams here. 29.8, so only 30 grams for that head weight. And if you want to compare it to something else, this is a Rossi C12 HPI branded 12R SC purple head. Let's give that a weight. That's almost 42 grams. So when you're wanting lightweight, that billet machine undercut head for these race style engines provide tons of cooling surface area, but do it in a lightweight fashion. Something else that's relatively unique is that this kind of looks like a 6 or a multi-port head in this design, but really there are tons and tons of cutouts to make this lightweight. Some heads are only bidirectional, where they allow air to go in one way but not the other, Well, this actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different passages to allow air to flow through this head, makes it that much more lightweight, and allows for that added cooling that the engine needs, even though this is a low profile head. And the style is pretty neat. 853 insignia, STS logo with some fire and some flames. It's a beautiful looking head. So this is a head button engine. Pop this head button out. Relatively firm on there. This has right now one head shim, and this is a 0.3 millimeter head shim, which is relatively common for these 12 style engines. The manufacturer recommends 0.3 as a starting point, and then as you go up in Nitro, you want to increase your shim pack a little bit more. For example, you want 20% Nitro, then you're going to be somewhere between 0.3 and 0.4, 25% Nitro, 0.4 to 0.5, etc. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish with the engine, how your engine's running in your certain condition, is how you can adjust that. This head is relatively unique. It's a turbo head style, but there are 3 cutouts in that head bowl area. And we have an arrow denoting to the rear. This was another thing that was missing from a brand new engine. Even though the manufacturer calls out and recommends head shims for this engine, this particular one did not have any head shim. So, but with some experience and with some spare parts, this is actually a Nitro RC C12 head shim that fits on there perfectly. And you can use the 0.1, 0.2, or 0.3 style in any stack up that you need or want. But make sure that you disassemble your complete brand new engines and make sure that all the components are there. You don't want to get into trouble where the head's leaking, or you're potentially going through some pre-ignition or detonation on the engine, even when you're running low 16 or 20% nitro. So pop out this sleeve. This sleeve is fancy, and we're going to take a look at that in a moment. Pop out this piston. All billet rod. Very, very nice knife edge on the rod. Brass bushings top and bottom. This is a captured wrist pin style. This side is a dead end. This side has a clip for the wrist pin. This is an all billet CNC machine piston. 2 really pronounced oil grooves there on the top. Standard top of the piston. Just a beautiful CNC machine made piston and connecting rod. Let's take out the crank. This is a beautiful, beautiful crank. SG style shaft. This uses a 7x19x6 front bearing, and then also at 11x21x5 rear bearing. Extra oil and vacuum hole into the crank, which was added, as I understand, these originally were released in 2015 and 2016 when they released the 833 engine. This shares the same crank, and they added that vacuum hole, that oil drain. This is a drilled and filled crank. Big profile cut off of the balance lobe. This is not a crank that has intermediate slugs put in, but these are balanced dimples into the crank. Nice big shark fin, and not 1 but 2 fangs in the crank here. Here's the main one. Normally is located 180 degrees roughly from the connecting rod journal, and then we have another one going out the side here. This is one of those features where STS was going in the great direction, especially into the racing world. They had some ready-to-run engines also, but this is a perfect example. And this is, again, a Taiwan-made engine. And in 2015-2016, they actually won some of their national competitions in Taiwan, but for some reason, or they just didn't allow enough time, it didn't catch hold. The engines didn't catch hold in Europe or the United States at that time frame. This block is superb. There is so much special and extreme definition of our transfer ports, as well as our boost port and onto our exhaust port. You're not going to be able to see, but inside of the block there's some extreme milling out for all of the ports, and you'll see why when we look at the sleeve here in a moment. There's a pin for direction for the sleeve. Front bearing has a black rubber shield on it. Again, the bearings, both the front and the rear, are chrome steel. So let's go ahead and take a look at this sleeve. Let's start with the exhaust here. Look at these giant dog ears on the exhaust port. This is an Extreme 12 5-port engine. We have our boost port. It's relatively large with a giant bevel and a big leading cutout here for the boost port itself. There's an extreme, it might be hard to see, but an extreme bottom bevel to this sleeve to allow that airflow to come up and get into these transfer ports. The transfer ports themselves are relatively good size with a medium kind of bevel, and then our 4th and 5th port here is this vertical shape port with a nice big lead in as well, fang down here that might be difficult to see going into that port. Look onto the other side, transfer port, and a nice big transfer port on the side. ABC construction, chrome lined, brass sleeve, aluminum piston. Take a look at that piston sleeve. What an amazing engine. And then we have paired with the engine, this is an 0806 fully polished STS 2-chamber tune pipe. A large reinforced stinger here. This is an outlaw pipe. It's a 6mm stinger. The reason why they're called outlaw pipes is that they are not EFRA approved, and that's mainly because of the stinger style. When it's over 5mm in diameter, and there's a lot of other contributing factors, then they are not approved by the EFRA sanctioning body to be able to be used in formal races. And this is an outlaw pipe. It has a little bit more performance aspect and the bigger tip. The tip itself actually is replaceable. It comes with one inside of the box. You unscrew this and screw another one back in if this gets eaten up. A very large reinforced stinger here. Full polished 2-chamber STS pipe. This is just another example of STS was on the right road to be competitive in the race sector, and they just kind of fell apart. Somewhere in 2016 or early 2017 is when I believe they closed their doors and started selling everything off, and it's quite a shame. They had a great history and showing from 1977. Again, STS is owned by the Yen Bong Hardware Company in Taiwan. There's not a lot of components left out there in the market for these engines, especially since they are only produced for a couple of years. But they are great nonetheless. One last thing I wanted to mention about checking and inspecting your engines. The fitment between the sleeve and the block was very tight, as well as for the head button. I had to heat it up with the piston everything inside just a little bit to be able to remove that sleeve. But you can address that relatively simply. I like to use 2000 or 3000 grit sandpaper with some oil, and you just very, very lightly go over the surface of your sleeve. Sometimes there's just little burrs on the sleeve or inside of the block where all that milling and machining has been done. And you do the same thing, take some oil and some 3000 grit sandpaper and just go over, and you're just breaking those machined edges. And then of course you have to wash the entire block. In order to do that, take out your bottom neck O-ring, take out your pinch bolt, heat up and take out your O-rings, take off your gasket so it's a bare block. Take your sandpaper and go in there, and then go back and soap and water and alcohol and wash out and blow out your entire block. And then do the same thing with the sleeve and try your fitment again. You want your sleeve to block fitment snug, but you do not want it to be so tight you can't fit it in without heat. At the same time, you don't want it flopping around and being able to fall out all by itself. You want kind of a slip fit, snug fit. So go down inside of there and be able to push it back out without any real heat. With a brand new sleeve and block, you shouldn't need any type of heat. And just that 3000, 2000 grit sandpaper, just a light touch with some oil and then cleaning afterward, broke off some of those very small edges, and now it goes in like butter, as it should. Something happened to STS and they just weren't able to continue their manufacturing efforts and into the race. But this is such a special STS 12 size engine 853, 5-port construction turbo head. This has a 1.6 horsepower rating at over 42,000 RPM. It's a screamer. And if you like these types of engine overviews, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to A2RC. If you like 10 scale, nitro, and especially touring cars, then this is the place to be. So thanks for taking the adventure with me.